Yo, party people in the place to be. What's good? It's your man, Uncle Freezy, in the building. I am rocking at two places at one time. So um just wanted to jump on with the topic real quick. I know the Knicks and Lakers play at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. So that's 7:30 for you guys out there on the West Coast. So I'm coming through really quickly just to talk for a few minutes um, about culture. So I'm coming through just chopping it up really quickly about culture. So salute to everybody that's watching this on the Check Ball podcast. Salute to everybody watching this on Lawrence Tears and everybody on Twitter and the other social media spaces. What I'm going to talk about really quick is the word culture and the reason why we may be going about culture in the wrong way, right? The reason why a lot of franchises may be going about the term culture in an incorrect way. So I'm going to ask, what is culture? And why do a lot of franchises get it wrong? Right? So I have some slides here on the screen that I want to share with you, and I'm going to chop it up about those for a few minutes before I go prepare my pregame meal and get ready for the Knicks versus Lakers and that late game window. So what is culture? Culture is um a unicorn. Culture is a fictional thing that NBA people make up to describe something that's nebulous and either unquantifiable or non-quantifiable, whichever word that you choose to describe. But culture is what people describe or what people use to describe the environment of champions. If you're champions and people don't know what the secret sauce is, they point to culture, right? And I will say to you guys that that can you can't be any further from the truth when you say culture. In my mind, if you want to win, you have to have a combination of player buy-in and sacrifice, visionaries like Jerry West, infrastructure like the San Antonio Spurs, and luck like the Boston Celtics and Golden State Warriors. You have to have a reasonable portion of all of these things. You have to have it, right? So you have to have luck, infrastructure, buy in, right? But all of these things to separate degrees, right? And so the reason why I wanted to make this video and to wanted to talk to you guys about it, whether you're a Knicks fan or say you're a fan of other teams and you're watching this on the Check Ball podcast, the reason why I say that is because certain organizations are toxic and they keep it in-house, but they win, right? The Chicago Bulls internally during the Michael Jordan era were toxic from the owner all the way down to the players. It was a toxic environment. But since they won championships, we look at that era. We look at that era as if the Bulls were an outstanding organization. Every time I mention Michael Jordan, my dog starts barking, y'all. I'm sorry. The Chicago Bulls were a toxic organization. The owner was a cheapskate that loved the White Sox more than he loves the Bulls. Jerry Reinsdorf, right? The team president and GM was a penny pincher that didn't value his players. The head coach was a Zen master throwback shaggy dude type hippie from the 60s that couldn't connect with today's players, even in the 90s. There were players that didn't like their role and felt like they deserved more credit. And their star player was an egomaniac. But we point to that era of Chicago Bulls basketball as a culture. That culture was toxic. The star player was selling $200 shoes to parents that were only making $200 a week at that time. At that time. At that time. And it's not just Chicago. Look at your 1980s Los Angeles Lakers. You had a millionaire and billionaire. I'll call Jerry Dr. Buss a billionaire. I don't know what his finances were. I don't care. For this topic, I'm only pointing out that you had an owner that showed preferential treatment to his star player, flew him around the world, would go on dates with his star player, take his star player to the Playboy Mansion. The owner loved this one player so much more than every other player that it never even dawned on him that he should build a trophy for maybe the greatest player to ever play basketball, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Why did it take so long for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to get a trophy? I'm sorry, a statue outside of where they play? It makes no sense, right? But for fan bases, such as the Brooklyn Nets, the New York Knicks, the Sacramento Kings, the Phoenix Suns, the Portland Trailblazers, these fan bases, the Indiana Pacers, these fan bases will point to culture as the reason why they don't win. And I'm here to tell you that just the conversation of culture tells me that these fan bases are pointed in the wrong direction. I'm going to use a starving fan base for an example, right? I'm going to use a starving fan base as an example. I'm going to use the New York Knicks. And shout out to everybody watching this on the Check Ball podcast and on Blowing's Tears and in social media, wherever you are. But I'm going to use the New York Knicks as an example of miscast energy and resources. If you are, you know what? I'll use a couple of fan bases. You know what? I'll include the Atlanta Hawks. I'll include the Washington Wizards. If your organization at the top is saying they need to establish a culture, for one, the as a fan, the first question you should be asking is a culture of what? If you're trying to establish a culture as a fan, you should put your wallet back in your pocket, put your debit card back in your pocket, take your hand off the mouse, and ask, what type of culture are we trying to build? Because to a fan that has been around basketball for a long time, the first question should be, shouldn't we, since day one, shouldn't you have a mission statement? Shouldn't your mission statement drive your culture? And if you don't have a mission statement, if you don't have a goal, then you can't establish a culture. The culture should be a byproduct of your mission and your goals. And if you, as an organization, New York Knicks, are trying to establish or reestablish a culture every time you change team presidents, that means your mission statements and your goals do not align. It's the same for the Indiana Pacers. It's the same for the Portland Trailblazers. It's the same for the Milwaukee Bucks. It's the same for the New Orleans Pelicans. If you don't have a mission and a timetable, because mission and goals sound the same. No, the goal, and that is changing around every 5 years as you change team presidents and GMs. Then you're not going to be able to establish a culture, because culture is a byproduct of action. Culture is a byproduct of action, right? And in order for you to reach your goal, you have to have some of these things that I've outlined here. For one, you have to have togetherness. Everybody in the organization has to be on the same page. And you have to have visionaries and infrastructure and luck. And if you don't have all of these things, or are short, or if you have all of them but you are short on all of these things, you won't have a culture. So I want to speak to the visionary part of it first. If you don't have a leader of the organization at the top, if you don't have a guy, a person at the top, if the commander is directionless, you, your organization is directionless. If you're the Knicks or the Trailblazers or the Sacramento Kings or the Phoenix Suns or the New Orleans Pelicans or the Memphis Grizzlies, if you're the Detroit Pistons and your top guy doesn't have a timetable, you're doomed. So I'm going to ask you, regardless what fan base you're a fan of, and again, salute to everybody watching on the Check Ball podcast, and salute to everybody watching this on Lawrence Tears, our home base, the Knicks channel. I'll ask my Knicks fans, do you feel as if the leader of this organization is a visionary? Do you feel as if the leader of the Knicks franchise is a visionary? If he's not a Jerry West type, if he's not a Danny Ainge type, then you're spinning your wheels. And for the sake of this not going too long, and for the sake of this video not going too long, does your organization have infrastructure? Are you confident in your analytics department? Are you confident in your scouting department? Are you confident in your budgetary team? Are you confident in your developmental staff? Because scouting and development are two different things. They don't go hand in. One feeds the other. One feeds the other. And if you don't have infrastructure, if you don't have a foundation, I don't even have to go there with the rest. I don't even have to go there with the rest. But if you're the Oklahoma City Thunder, do you have infrastructure? If you're the Knicks, do you have infrastructure? If you're the Washington Wizards, do you have infrastructure in place? Because you can go get as much talent as humanly possible, but without infrastructure, you're just doing cardio. Because the acquisition of talent is not always the issue. It's how you develop that talent. If your organization is telling you that they are trying to establish a culture, I'm telling you that organization doesn't have a mission and they don't have a goal. If they don't have a goal and a mission, they don't have a culture. So if they're telling you we're trying to establish a culture, that means they have no idea what they're doing. People will point to the San Antonio Spurs culture. Well, the Spurs have a culture because they have had a reasonable portion of luck, great infrastructure, and they're goal oriented. People will point to the Miami Heat's culture, right? The Heat's culture is one of sacrifice and togetherness. They have a visionary in Pat Riley, and they have infrastructure. Do you have this if you're the LA Clippers? If you're the Clippers, do you have a culture? If you're the Brooklyn Nets, do you have a culture? No. If you're the Knicks, do you have a culture? If you're today's Chicago Bulls, do you have a culture? No. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You just don't. Shout out to everybody watching this on the Check Ball podcast. Shout out to everyone watching this on Blowing's Tears. And I just wanted to put a video out here so that we can kind of debunk some of the things that we're force fed on a nightly, weekly, monthly, annual basis. Culture is something that we should debunk because if you don't have a goal, if you don't have a mission, and if you don't have visionaries and infrastructure to pull this off, you'll never have a culture. Anyway, I'm the number one Chief Rocket in Knicks universe, Uncle Freezy. Salute to everybody on the Check Ball podcast. Salute to everybody on Blowing's Tears, the home base. Thank y'all for watching, man. I'm going to holler at y'all in a few minutes. Peace, everybody.